right, good afternoon. As Steve indicated, my name is Michael Morris. I'm professor of psychology. I coordinate the master's program in community psychology. And I'm going to be moderating a panel this afternoon. We'll be here for about a half an hour with faculty and program coordinators giving you sort of advice and counsel about how to do well here and succeed while you are at UNH, which is what we all want you to do. And basically also how to stay out of trouble, which is the academic integrity and plagiarism part of this, which is incredibly important. Trust me on that. You want your time here to be one that is filled with learning and good experiences rather than the nightmare of getting into trouble around the originality of the work that you submit. And trust me, when things go wrong there, it can be a nightmare. So listen carefully to what these folks have to say. To my immediate right, I have Dr. Bill Norton from the Lee College. In the middle, David Eggert from the College of Engineering, and far right from the College of Business is Dr. Summer McGee. So I'm going to turn this over immediately to them, and we'll take questions for those who have them at the end, and I'll interject a few comments of my own at some point probably. So I will turn this over to Bill Norton.
Thanks, Mike. Welcome to the University of New Haven. I'd like to thank all of you for coming in, offer a few comments about things that I've found to be successful over the years. I started out here at the university in 1990 as the Director of Graduate Programs in Criminal Justice, and I'm still doing it. So I guess I must have liked it, stayed for a couple of years anyway. One of the things that I find helps students most is being active on campus. You know, you're going to get a lot more out of your education if you get involved. In criminal justice, we have a range of student clubs and activities that are really helpful for students. And your graduate education is much like everything else in your life. You're going to get out of it what you put into it. So join the clubs, get involved in the campus community. Your faculty members have office hours. They would welcome you to come in. Make a point of getting to know your graduate faculty members. One of the best experiences in my graduate education was getting to know my mentors, my faculty mentors in my graduate programs. Those are the people who can help you with letters of reference, give you guidance in terms of where you should apply for jobs, where to go in the next step in your career development. All of that happens when you get involved. What Professor Morris mentioned about staying out of trouble, I suppose I'll take a little bit of a different tact on that than the issues associated with academic integrity. For students who are in the Lee College, one of the things that you have to recognize is that most of the jobs that people will aspire to require you to have some kind of background investigation, clearance. And that's increasingly true for many types of professional employment in the world. All of the things that you do today typically end up being recorded in some database somewhere, as my colleagues from computer science can tell you about. Nothing is anonymous anymore. And so realize that those really funny photographs of you passed out drunk somewhere, they are out there forever, okay? They don't go away. And in our field, one of the things that the recruiters love to do is to ask prospective employees about, have you ever done this or that? And of course, the candidate says no, and then they turn around the monitor with the picture from Facebook, and it looks a lot like you, doesn't it? It stays out there forever. So be careful about what gets posted on social media, and realize that everything that you put out there is going to be out there forever for everybody, okay? And so you have to manage those kinds of issues in your life.
David.
Adaptability, I think, is going to be a key for many of you. Very many of you are international students and coming here from a completely different country in which the way that things are done could be vastly different than how they are done here. You may have come from an educational system that was very exam-based, for instance, and as long as you passed the exam at the end of the course, that was great. In most of the classes here, there will be homework assigned to you to do, and that will be part of your grade, and so not turning that in is going in the wrong direction. You might have taken classes that were in humongous lecture halls, bigger than this perhaps, And the idea of asking a question of your professor was something you never even thought about doing. And here in what hopefully will be smaller classes for most of you, we would encourage you to put up your hand and ask a question and take part in discussions in the various classes. As he was saying, we as faculty members tend to have office hours where we encourage the students to come and ask questions. You may have come from a place where approaching a professor to ask a question would make you look stupid, and it's never something you would ever try and do. So these are all changes that culturally are different. You may come from places where people worked in groups in most things, and here you may find yourself working individually and being responsible for turning in, quote, your own work all the time. Let's see, another bit of advice. An important person is your advisor. We're all serving as advisors of some of the programs. You may or may not have met your other advisors yet. I think there's a registration session coming up after this where some of you might be meeting your advisor for the first time. This is probably the person who's going to be your first point of contact for many things, and you should get to know them and don't do things that might upset them. One thing for me that not everybody gets the very first time is if somebody says no, it usually means no. And to continue asking the same question 5 more times and getting 5 more no's begins to irritate your advisor. To sit in a person's office for an hour asking for the same thing really irritates your advisor. And that might be, again, another cultural difference for some people, that you may have come from a culture of being persistent and stubborn really eventually got you that yes in the end. In most cases here, no will mean no. And we don't say no lightly. We don't say no for everything. If it should be yes, we say yes. But if it's supposed to be no, we say no. So adaptability, changing in cultures, changing in the educational system is probably going to be a major change for some of you, and hopefully one that you can accomplish.
Thank you. Summer.
Hi, everyone. Good afternoon. I think I certainly agree with the points that my other colleagues have made. Some other things I would add are also, I think one of the most important skills that you should learn as a graduate student is time management. Many of you are taking multiple courses. Some of you are also working full-time. You really need to master the art, and hopefully sooner rather than later, of being able to schedule and manage your time well. Most of the issues that I see with academic integrity from my students are from the students who turn in their papers at the last minute. They panic, they're not prepared, their work isn't done, and so the quickest and easiest thing to do is to go to the internet and copy a passage, not cite it, and try to use that as your own work. Obviously, that's not okay, but what I see it as a symptom of is that people don't adequately manage their time and put themselves in circumstances where you can't do the very best work that you all are capable of doing. You wouldn't be here if you weren't capable of doing graduate level work. So I think that's one thing that I would say as a tip or a trick is be sure to allow yourself enough time for any of your assignments, whether it's a written paper or any other kind of projects that you're doing. Give yourself the time so that you can succeed. I'm an ethicist by training, and I notice everybody hasn't really talked much about academic integrity head on, so I will mention a few other issues about academic integrity that I think are important. Obviously, you need to, if you're using the ideas, whether you're paraphrasing them or summarizing them, if you're using anyone else's idea, you need to properly cite it. What I always tell my students in my classes is it would be better to cite something that you didn't need to and to have made that mistake than to not have cited it if you should have. So that is something I think you should just keep in the back of your mind. Any idea that wasn't your original thought that you had in the shower that morning, or that you put together from synthesizing 2 or 3 pieces of work together, probably needs to be cited. And so you need to, and hopefully this is something that your instructors in your classes will help you with. We also have the Center for Learning Resources where you can also get additional tutoring on writing and citation. That's something that if you don't already feel comfortable knowing how to do that, that you will learn how to do that very quickly once you are here as a graduate student. I think the other thing that I will say that is a tip that has to do with your experience as a graduate student is look around in this room. A lot of the people you see you're going to be with for the next year or two. These people are an incredible resource for you. Your instructors are for sure, but your colleagues and your peers in your classes are going to be people that you are going to know for the rest of your life. You may end up working with them. You may end up getting a tip about a job from them. So be engaged on campus, as Professor Norton said, but also be sure to focus on the relationships that you're building while you're a graduate student, because they can be really valuable, not just for your career, but for the rest of your life. And so I would encourage you to be sure to benefit from the knowledge and the experiences, not just from the people who are starting in their programs right now, but from the people ahead of you in your programs who have had good experiences and can direct you to the clubs that you want to join, the other activities you could do, good opportunities for internships, and so forth. So please use your peers in your programs as a resource as well.
Thank you very much. I'll make a few comments, and then I'll turn it back over to our panelists to see if there's anything else they'd like to comment upon, and then we'll open it up to questions. I know there are folks with microphones out there if you have a hard time getting heard. One has to do with the time management issue that Dr. McGee mentioned. And for the next 2 terms, I think that will really be at its preeminent form in your experience. Next year, the graduate school moves to a semester system. But for the next 2 terms, we will remain on a trimester system, which means starting today, the spring trimester is underway. It's 13 weeks, and there is no break in the trimester. In the fall, there was a Thanksgiving week break where you could kind of catch up if you fall behind. There's no real time to catch up if you fall behind during this trimester. And then after this trimester is over, the summer trimester begins, which begins starts at the beginning of April. That's 13 weeks, and there's no break there either. So you can't afford to really fall behind in that trimester as well. In semester systems, there are some breaks during the term, but for the next 2 terms, your life starts today and it goes nonstop till the trimester is over. So the more you put things off or procrastinate, the more you put yourself at risk and get yourself in the situation that Dr. McGee mentioned, where you may be strongly tempted to do something that a part of you is saying, I know this isn't the right thing to do, but I'm cornered. And that's never a situation you want to be in. Another more general adjustment at the academic level that students, I think, experience regardless of where they come from, whether they're a domestic student or come from another country, is the shift in expectations for work when you move from the undergraduate to the graduate level. Often at the undergraduate level, you are primarily evaluated on how well you can summarize and what you've read, what the lectures have been about, what's been talked about in class. There's much more of an emphasis on what did the textbook say, what were the major points that were being made, what did you get out of that. Whereas in graduate school, particularly in very applied programs, such as most of the programs here at UNH at the graduate level, the emphasis is much more on how can you apply the concepts that you've been reading about or we've been talking about in class. In virtually all the courses I teach, all the assignments are take-home assignments. So simply being able to tell me what you read gets you nothing, because obviously I realize you could simply tell me and repeat what you read in the text or what you took notes from a lecture on. What you're going to be rewarded on is your ability to take those concepts and apply them to situations that I present you with. Case scenarios, specific situations where I'll be asking you, take these concepts and show us how those concepts will help us understand this particular situation. I find for many students, regardless of where they came from, this is a major adjustment. They are simply not used to doing that. And don't be surprised if it's, for some of you, a jolting experience depending on the nature of your undergraduate education and where you went to school. The last issue I'll touch on is the one around academic integrity and ethics, because, and I think this applies both to domestic students and international ones, but it does take on an additional wrinkle with international students, because often there are norms within the culture within which you went to school around what's regarded as being academically ethical, and what may be regarded in the United States as academically ethical, and what is appropriate. What's plagiarism in one setting might be regarded as somewhat differently in another setting. But the reality is, for the next several academic terms in your graduate career, you will be going to school here. So to put it bluntly and hopefully not rudely, whatever the academic norms were around ethics where you come from, they don't matter. What matters are the academic norms here. So it's not going to get you much traction or credibility to say, but where I came from, this is the way things operate. It doesn't matter that that's the way things operated where you came from. It's how things operate here. So if you are ever in doubt about what it's appropriate to do, by all means, go to the instructor of that course and say, okay, I'm a little confused because my understanding of what you're saying about this issue is such and such, and my understanding from where I came is such and such. Help me understand where these two things might come into conflict. It is, trust me, it is always better to do that than to engage in a behavior in terms of turning in a paper or any sort of assignment where the instructor looks at it and says, this is not appropriate for here. And it's very difficult to extract yourself from a situation like that, and you just don't want to get in that situation, particularly given it's so easily avoidable by having a conversation with the instructor of the course. So that would just be, I think prevention is the best way to deal with most problems we encounter, and certainly ethical problems, issues around plagiarism and academic integrity fall into that category. So having said that, before I ask for any questions, I'll turn this back over to our panelists. Is there anything else you would like to add that has occurred to you? Summer.
I just wanted to add one thing to echo on your point about communication. It is so important that you be in regular communication with your instructors. If there's anything going on that is going to, or may even prevent you from attending class, or may mean that an assignment is late, as the instructor, we don't know if you don't tell us that your computer got run over by the car, or that you can't get into your email, or you can't access Blackboard on the weekend when there's an exam, unless you communicate with us and tell us what's going on with you. It could be something more serious if there's an illness in your family, or heaven forbid if you are ill. The only way that we as program coordinators and your advisors and as your faculty can help you is if you tell us. So it is vital that you take advantage of our office hours and communicate regularly with us about any kinds of issues. We are here to facilitate and to help you have a successful and positive experience as a graduate student at UNH. But the only way we and your faculty members can do that is if you come to us and let us know what you need and what we can do to help you. The email a week later, after you've already missed the deadline, saying I had a problem with my computer, or I lost my phone, that's not going to cut it. In graduate school, we are expecting that you are going to be responsible and meet your deadlines, but we also know things happen. But we need you to communicate regularly and clearly with us in advance so that we can be there to help you in ways that are fair to you, given your circumstance, but also fair to the other students in your class who are meeting their deadlines and doing things as originally asked. So please, please just communicate whenever there is an issue.
Okay. Anything else? Anybody else?
Following a little bit on that, communicating definitely the sooner rather than later. Sometimes people will come to my office halfway in the middle of the term thinking about wanting to withdraw from a class and saying, I've fallen behind or I don't understand. And my first question will be, well, have you talked to the faculty member? And no. And it's like, okay, this is 6 or 7 weeks along. You definitely should have been worrying about this quite a while back, especially for the international students where you might not even have the luxury of being able to withdraw from a class because you'll no longer be considered full-time and in status for your visa and stuff. You need to address any problems you're having sooner rather than later.
I also like to reinforce the point that was made that when you go to one of your instructors about an issue you're having in a class, whatever it might be, and essentially you're asking for some type of special treatment, keep in mind that the instructor can't just be thinking about you. We have to be thinking about what is fair to all the other students in the class who may have had an issue similar to yours, but did not come forward to ask for special treatment in some fashion. So the concern the faculty member frequently has is, what decision can I make in this situation that is going to be fair to everyone in the class? For me, that usually means if I'm going to give this particular student an opportunity to do something that's different than what was said in the syllabus, in most cases I'm going to say, I would have to give that opportunity to every other student in the course, or at least make them aware of it. Now, in some situations, logistically, that's simply not possible to do. And sometimes I simply have to say, I see your point. However, it simply would not be possible for me to give everybody this opportunity, and to give it only to you would be unfair to the others. And sometimes I have to make tough decisions, and I'll take responsibility for those tough decisions. But realize it's not that I'm trying to be unsympathetic or unempathic to your concerns. It's that I have other people to take into account when I make those sort of decisions. And some of the toughest decisions I have had to make as an instructor are around those issues. Grading papers and exams, compared to those sort of decisions, are relatively easy. Making decisions about what is fair and ethical to everybody in the class, that sometimes is tough, and we typically do not make those decisions lightly. So don't think we're just not hearing you. Almost always we are hearing you, but we're trying to take a lot of factors into consideration. So we have a few minutes for questions. We have folks with microphones up there. Are there anyone who has a question that they'd like to pose to anyone here about any of this stuff? There's a question down here, and somebody's coming to assist you.
Just on the academic integrity and plagiarism issue, if a student does have an original idea or thought in the shower, as you said, are they then responsible to go and research and find out if anyone else has had that thought before them?
Well, I think that the standard is not that you read every piece of literature written on planet Earth to assert that you have an original idea or that you have synthesized information together and come up with a new thought. That's not the standard. I think the reasonable standard would be based on the reading and the research that you were asked to do for the course. If you are coming up with your own ideas, that is not something you would be expected to cite. That is your own original synthesis or idea. Anything that is anyone else's idea, directly the same, whether it's copied or quoted or even paraphrased, would require a citation. So if you're putting together two different ideas and saying, well, I think that it's really, not A and B, but in fact B plus or C, that's an original idea. That's something you don't have to cite.
If I can follow up slightly, one of the things that I think you would always want to do is if you come up with an original idea in the shower or driving to campus, wherever it might be, you really want to do the research and be sure that someone else has not already come up with that idea. In our college, the basic instruction to our faculty is any papers that are submitted, everything, we run it through multiple databases to see if someone has in fact committed an act of plagiarism or borrowed work from someone else. And much like the social media that I mentioned before, it's all out there. Basically, everything's been scanned in at this point in history. If you're copying someone else's work, you're using someone else's work, you're not going to get away with it. And so just as a matter of good practice, if you come up with a novel, interesting idea, always research your idea as well to be sure that you can't make it a little bit better based on the other work that's already in the research literature.
Other questions?
Yes, hello. Do you guys know of a free database or free servers that we can run papers through or run our work through ahead of time before we submit it?
In our college, we utilize Turnitin, and what you'll find in terms of the way the Lee College operates, almost all of our instructors teach students how to work with Turnitin, and then you can run your paper through that process. You'll get a report back from Turnitin, and if there are any issues, you'll be able to see those before you make the final submission to the instructor for the grade. And that's the standard product that we use. There are several others that are out there, but that's the one that's used in our college.
Other questions? Other questions? Yes, someone in the middle here. Equidistant from two microphones. Okay, he went to the left, that means politically liberal. Okay,
Cool.
thank you.
How well do you work with military personnel, just in case if you come down 2 weeks older or something like that?
We try to be very flexible when we can, depending on how many lectures you might miss. You know, somebody else gets you the notes in the class. In some cases, your lectures might have been recorded using the Integrity system, or I usually record all of my lectures. Assignments, again, if you are proactive and let the person know ahead of time, arrangements may be made for an alternate turn-in date. Again, if the first time we hear about it is 3 weeks after you get back, then it's much harder to make a good decision about something that's fair to everybody in the class. But there are many situations. Military is only one of the reasons why people might be going out of town for a week or two.
Is there any way we can stay in touch through email, or I could turn my work in?
Yeah,
like that?
certainly in many cases, you know, depending on what the type of the assignment is, if it can be handed in over email, that's usually acceptable for many faculty members.
Thank you.
One of the things about the University of New Haven that I value is the fact that we have a long history of educating working professionals. We've worked with people from the military, people from the business world, people from the public safety world, lots of experience with people who may be away for a week or two. And if you come and give your advisor advance notice, your instructors advance notice, I'm confident they'll try to work with you.
Other questions? Other questions? Your question does bring up a sort of related issue. Occasionally, every once in a while, a student will sort of disappear from a class, and they'll be there for the first 5 weeks, and then you hear nothing from them. And then they show up like at week 12 with their story, and almost never is their story, you know, I was working for special ops and I had to go under deep cover into the bowels of New Jersey to look at traffic corruption under the Christie administration. It's never something like that. It's always something that could have easily been, not, I wouldn't say easily, but could have been communicated to the instructor at a time that would have made decision-making on the part of the instructor much easier to engage in. So I would really encourage you, given that almost none of you are going to be in a situation where for reasons of national security you can't tell us what you're going to be doing and why you have to disappear, let us know, and our life is much easier when we can help you succeed. Our life becomes more difficult when you do things that give us fewer options to help you succeed. So I'd really encourage you, just if you have to take off for a few weeks for some reasons that are defensible and you think you can work something out, let us know. We'll do the best we can. Sometimes it doesn't work out. In some sort of courses, if you miss class time, the nature of what happens in those class sessions are so important that there is no way to make it up, and it's just one of those circumstances that you can't work around. But in many cases, you can. And programs differ by what their norms and standards are around that. Within the community psych program, we have very high attendance norms in terms of using up all the class time. You pay for 3 hours, you're going to get 3 hours. You might only want 2.5 hours, you might only want an hour and 45 minutes. You'll get 3 hours if you're taking a course in the community psychology program. So program norms do differ, and it's important to have a sense of what the norms are in the program you're in. Any other questions or comments? I think we're just a little bit past our time for turning you back over to Steve to take you through the rest of the day. I'd like to have us give our thanks to our panelists. And thank you very much for coming, and good luck at UNH.